A tumbler of Merlot went down smoothly. The combination of alcohol, acetaminophen, and pyrilamine helped me drop off slowly into a comfortable embrace of sleep. The turtle doves sang on the red clay roof of our family home, row upon row of interlocking rounded tiles fitting together like elbow macaroni. I woke up to the mail carrier's moped out front. We didn't get many deliveries, so it was a welcome distraction from my discomfort. Daniela, this came for you, Zia Luigina sing-songed her way up the staircase. It was a package wrapped in a brown paper bag. I looked at it, still lying in my cot. It had come all the way from Abbotsford, BC. I recognized my teacher's handwriting on it. The street address on Town Line Road. An artifact from my life that I thought was all but dead and gone had traveled all the way to me in the house on Via Maggiore where my grandmother was born in the early 1930s. Canada, a place I used to live. A place with asphalt roofs, gypsum and paper walls, and more words I understood than not. Quite the opposite of my grandmother's family estate, just an hour north of Venice, Italy. I unwrapped the package, noticing the book smelled like my school did. Unpacking my suitcase a few weeks earlier, I smelled Canada too. My great-grandmother's favorite Camay hand soap, Grandma's Freeze and Shine hairspray, and Tide machine detergent exhaled at me from between the zipper teeth. When I lived inside those scents, it was as though they weren't there at all. But I discovered in that moment I'd thoroughly logged them into memory. It's from my school. Well, my old school, I said, still rubbing my eyes from the slight hangover. The afternoon sun peeked into the bedroom through the cracks and openings of the roll shutters. There was no glass on the windows for summer. Uh-oh, nothing bad, I hope, Zia joked, sitting on the edge of the cot. I unwrapped the package. Oh, is that ever nice, she said. The cover was green and embossed with the school name, St. John Brebeuf, a crest, and a large 95. No, it's not bad, I said, smiling. She asked me all about the people in the photos. I knew everyone, and yet it felt like I didn't. By this time, my mom had been away in Spain for a while. We'd been overseas for about 6 weeks at that point. The sight of once familiar people who I saw daily in this book felt like strange, distant memories. There was a "look ma no hands" image of Ms. Gillis driving her Pontiac Acadian. The license plate looked so big and it only had 6 digits and numbers. Images of girls who rolled up their kilts as high as possible. Only one of them had a baby so far. Is this what it's like to go to school? Zia asked. That's what it's like in a private Catholic school. Yeah, I said. There were many photos of sports I didn't play and school trips I never went on. You had uniforms? So fancy. Yeah, we did. Not my favorite part of school, but we did wear uniforms, I said, grimacing. What colors were they? She asked. The photos were all black and white. It was like looking at old family photos in construction paper albums with the pretty bordered edges and photo corners. As a young child, I used to think colors had been invented after the photos were taken. The sweaters are red and the shirts are white. The girls wore kilts sometimes, and those are blue with white and red stripes. We were eventually allowed to wear black pants instead of kilts, too. Zia was from the same generation as my nono and nona. When they all got to the age I was at that time, 14, they'd already been out of school for years to work the farms where they lived. I already had more formal academic experience than them by simply getting to high school. You all right now? It's been a couple hours, Zia said as I sat up. I went down with her to the kitchen. where the TV was still blasting her favorite afternoon soap called Beautiful. Yeah, I think I can stretch now, maybe even stand up for a while. I bet I can find cartoons to watch, Zia said, grabbing the huge remote control. I knew she was deeply sympathetic to my strife when that happened, because her soap was important. We found a channel playing Looney Tunes. In this case, it was Tom and Jerry, perfect for us because there is little to no dialogue and lots of chaos to laugh at. Bugs Bunny was fun too, but there was too much dialogue for me to translate in real time. I loved it when she wanted to watch cartoons. It meant she wanted to sit and be with me. Normally, she had her back to the TV because she was cooking or washing up. These are very old, you know, I said. They're still funny, and that's what matters, she said, grabbing an ashtray and stealing one of Annalisa's cigarettes. If I didn't buy the pack myself, that means I'm still not smoking, she said, searching out a matchbook. We saw an episode where Tom and Jerry were sword fighting along a table full of food. Jerry's French cousin mouse was also in it. Tom poked the blue mouse on the bum with his sword, prompting him to yell, "Hey, attention là!" while pointing at the poke. Zia and I laughed and made our own mock sword fights with butter knives. I haven't seen these in a very long time. They're from the 1940s and 50s, you know, I said. Same time as when your grandparents were first married. Yeah, I suppose so, I said, remembering the year 1953. I remember your Nona's mother telling me that Luciana would recognize her new husband at the train station because he would be wearing his good suit with a yellow flower on his lapel. He'd written that to her in a letter so she would know what he looked like. I wondered about that. She didn't know him very well, did she? Not really, from what I can tell, Zia said. Zia had been born and raised in the same town as my grandfather. Everybody knew everybody and never strayed far, except my Nono and his siblings. Post-war, he went to Australia for a short time and even considered settling in Argentina, as his older sisters had. He had an aunt and uncle who sponsored him in Trail, BC, and he was allowed passage to Canada. They gave him a job in their general store. It felt oddly familiar to my life at the time, just in reverse. I was in Europe like an immigrant. My grandparents came to stay with us in Spain on their way back to Canada. It was nice to go to Madrid for a change. We seldom went further than Salamanca city limits or even Villamayor, where we lived. There, we lived in what we'd call a townhouse complex in Canada, brick row houses as single-family dwellings. It reminded me of Grandma and Gramps' townhouse on Admirals Road in Esquimalt, that orange wall-mounted phone in their kitchen. Gramps hammering his feet on the floor every morning for coffee. In Spain, our complex had a name and a gate, which made it feel a bit different than places I'd seen at home. You live in Las Canteras? Students asked in disbelief. Sí, verdad, I said in my best lisping Castilian accent, indicating that I indeed did live in this gated community. I've heard of it, but I've never been there, Javier said. To us, it looked like a regular place to live, but this was my introduction to how average people in Spain lived. Most had apartments shared with not only siblings and parents, but a tío and a tía, and an abuelo and an abuela were common members of the nuclear family here. Even though we were at a private Montessori school, I soon learned I'd become accustomed to a different lifestyle than many of my Spanish contemporaries. We had a 3-story townhouse for only 4 inhabitants, a home phone number, and a computer with dial-up internet access, 2 things many folks didn't have at home. In Italy, we had 1 phone on the property. It was in a separate room on the front of the old barn. We had 2 TVs, which was luxurious. One large Blaupunkt lived in the kitchen, and a little one in Zia's room. We watched Pope John Paul II live, giving Mass from the Vatican. We watched psychic prediction shows, game shows, music videos, and the news about Bosnia-Herzegovina. Zia's husband traveled a lot for work and was often away in Yugoslavia. "It's the end of days," she proclaimed as we watched news reports of tanks rolling through people's lives only a couple hours' drive from here. Our family home had an archway facing the main street. I was at the fountain one morning doing my job of collecting our daily allowance of drinking water in empty pop bottles. On my way back to the archway, known as Il Portone, which always made me think of it as a portal, I saw what looked like crumpled clothes that I hadn't noticed before. As I got closer, I saw it was 2 young boys huddled there. When they saw me, they put out their hands. I dropped the bottles on the table that Zia was dressing for morning coffee. She'd tossed the tablecloth on, along with some still hot cornetti buns that are delicious with Nutella spread. The coffee was brewing on the stove and smelled so much better than the Maxwell house Gramps would have perked at home. "Zia, did you know we have 2 boys, nel portone?" I asked, pointing. I was saddened by their need to beg. "What boys?" she asked, suddenly aggravated. I instantly regretted bringing it up. She threw open the back door and grabbed her broom used for the little patio and ran down to the archway, yelling. I put my head out the window, my hair landing in some dew still left on the geraniums. "You get out of here, you bums! I don't ever want to see you again, you hear me?" Zia looked and sounded like another woman as she slammed her broom on the ground to intimidate them. They were close to me and my sister's age. It bothered me just as much as seeing her chase a Moroccan man off the property with that same broom lifted over her head. He'd been by, offering his wares for sale, which is a common means of earning a living there. When Zia saw this tall black man talking to us, she changed. "Nobody wants your shit. Does it look like we need it? Get off this property and don't you ever come back," she yelled as the man walked off unfazed. "Don't pay attention to those kids," she said when she got back to the house. "They're just beggars. Don't believe anything they say." "But they're just kids trying to survive, Zia," I did my best to say with my limited Italian vocabulary, feeling hurt by her treating them so badly. "So they say. That's what they all say. Everybody's got a story." "Do you know those boys?" "No, I've never seen them," she said, lighting a cigarette, waving her match out. "Then how do you know they're lying?" "Oh, you silly people who feel badly about others," she said. "Kids make great beggars because of people like you. You believe their dirty clothes and faces mean they're poor. They're just trying to get money, that's all." "I have some money of my own," I said, defiantly showing off a few lire I had in my wallet. "Don't you dare! If you give them anything, they'll be back for more, like stray cats and dogs," she projected, her fist in the air. I was quiet the rest of the day. I was used to being disappointed in my elders to some degree, but I had trouble facing Zia after that. I felt like up until then I'd known only certain curated aspects of her character. Then I was shown the stuff that I squirmed about when my grandparents did them. I felt that confusing concoction of love for these people that also included incredible disgust and shame. I'd already heard my parents say, "They're just from another generation and they'll never change," after I asked about why Nono often referred to Asians as yellow and black people were mud people. I hated the culture of making excuses for elders in order to perpetuate their racism and insatiable desire to remain divided. I've been Danielle Walker. Nice to meet you.